Hello, AP Biology. I forgot to hit record while we were doing our Zoom, so I'm just going to go through it now. So we talked about the catalase lab, which could be tricky. And then in class, we did some practice with graphene. So I thought that was good for us because a lot of us struggled with graphene during our lab this weekend. For me, a big takeaway is not to use units on my table. I'll include units on my titles. And then my other takeaway was when I'm making my tables, I want it in the form of X, Y. So my first column will be my independent variable, the thing I changed. And then my second column will be the thing I measured, my dependent variable. So I think if we use those two tips, that's really going to help us create graphs without errors. Today we're going to talk about a little bit about metabolism. That should be new information, and you're going to continue working with the metabolism concept outside of the Zoom with a free energy POGL. Free energy is really a new topic, I think, for us. We don't hit it at all in biology. For me, I find it tricky to remember the formula and delta G, and is it spontaneous, is it not spontaneous? So hopefully after watching the video from Mr. Bozeman, Mr. Anderson on Bozeman Science, you'll really get the idea that the entropy, that the universe likes disorder, entropy. And then you'll get more practice using the POGL, okay? So do that outside of class. This PowerPoint is a borrowed PowerPoint. It is, sorry, I got lots of things jumping up here. It's a two-part. So the second part is enzymes, and we already covered that. So I'm going to skip past that second part. So here we're talking about metabolism, which you know is the sum total of all chemical reactions. Metabolic pathways link several reactions together to get to an ultimate goal. So we talked about this last week a little bit with our feedbacks, and that you have an initial substrate that binds an enzyme, and it'll make some sort of intermediate that fits a different enzyme, which forms another intermediate. These are called intermediate because they're not the final product. That intermediate fits another enzyme. Calvin cycle, that's a great example of a metabolic pathway. Makes a final product. Last week, we talked about how the final product could come back and act as an allosteric inhibitor, or maybe a competitive inhibitor, and stop one of these enzymes. That's not what today's topic is about. So when we talk about metabolism, we talk about building up and breaking down. Catabolic, I think catastrophe is destruction. So with a catabolic reaction, you are going to break things down. This releases energy because energy is stored in bonds. Anytime you make bonds, store energy. Anytime you break bonds, you release energy. Okay. Anabolic reactions then, those are the ones that you build up. Anytime anabolism outranks catabolism, you're growing. Anytime catabolism outranks anabolism, you're breaking down, okay? So that's something to think about. So this is showing you how anabolism and catabolism together make up your metabolism. I think a lot of kids have a misconception about metabolism. They think they're skinny because they have a fast metabolism, or they're heavy because they have a slow metabolism. But notice this isn't about how quickly we break things down. It's about breaking things down and then using that to build things up. Okay, so when we talk about these reactions, we're talking about energy. Energy, you know, is the ability to do work. That's like one of the first definitions I think we learned in science. Organisms need energy to survive and function. That is not enough in an FRQ answer to tell me why we need energy. Be specific. What do we use it for that allows us to survive? What do we use it for that allows us to function? So kinetic energy, we need it to move things, both our body outside and internally we need to move things. We need to move molecules in and out of cells, active transport. We need to move food through our digestive system. Of course, I'm just using the human example, but you can imagine other organisms are the same. We have thermal energy, energy associated with movement of atoms and molecules. So like when we talked about kinetic energy of motion, with enzymes having a faster reaction rate as temperatures climb and a slower reaction rate as temperature declines, that would have to do with thermal energy. Potential energy is stored energy. Energy is stored in bonds. Energy can be stored in position of an atom, of a molecule, of a whole being. So chemical energy, we're really referring to energy that's being released in a chemical reaction. So we're talking about the energy that's in the bonds. So when talking about energy, we have to talk about laws of thermodynamics. Thermodynamics is the study of energy within a system. So we have two laws we are specifically interested in that apply to the entire universe. So the first one is energy cannot be created nor destroyed. It can be changed in form. This squirrel, sorry, this squirrel is eating a peanut, and it's taking the energy that is stored in this peanut, and it's going to use the energy. Is this going to be in the same form? No. He's going to take the energy from the protein that's in this peanut. He's going to break down that protein, break those bonds. He's going to use that to create ATP. So he's changing it in form. So the chemical energy is always potential energy. And then it's going to be changed into kinetic energy as the squirrel uses it to move things within his body or move himself across this tree. Introduce second law of thermodynamics, which is that you lose some energy in any energy transfer. So energy transformation increases the entropy disorder of the universe. And that makes sense. If we're breaking bonds, we have one big molecule, right? That's pretty orderly. When we break bonds, we have lots of atoms or mini molecules scattered. That's disorder. So we've went to entropy. The universe loves entropy. So during any energy transfer, you will lose some energy, usually in the form of heat. So as this squirrel is climbing the tree, he's using energy, but he's losing some of that energy to the environment in the form of heat. So cells create organized structures by taking in less organized starting material. So the proteins break down into amino acids. If this is true, how do cells not violate the second law of thermodynamics, the entropy? So when we break down the nut and you break down the proteins, you're releasing smaller and smaller components, right? So those smaller and smaller components are not held close together and thus are increasing entropy. You're also releasing CO2 and water when you break down any of your food molecules, right? That is part of cellular respiration, changing. This year, we're going to go beyond just glucose, but we're going to change our nutrients into usable energy. We lose some of that usable energy, carbon dioxide and water. So the bonds in those we're not accessing, right? We're not accessing the energy in that. In comparison to early life on Earth, organisms today are highly organized and complex. How does this increase in organization over time not violate the second law of thermodynamics? Again, we had these simple organisms that were very orderly, and they've begun to branch into several different phyla, order, classes, species, right? So we've taken this initial substance and we've really disordered it. We've spread it out, if you will. Okay, so free energy doesn't just apply to a peanut. It doesn't just apply to a squirrel. It applies to the entire universe, right? So we are all operating within a system and we want to measure free energy. Free energy determines whether a reaction is likely to occur on its own or not. So whether it's likely to be spontaneous, if it's energetically favorable. Okay, so we're going to use this formula. Delta, this triangle is called delta, and the delta is read as change. So the difference between two, right? So we have the difference, the change in free energy delta G, the change in total energy, that whole energy of the system, delta H, and temperature as it is measured in kelvins times delta S, the change in entropy of the system. Okay, for a reaction to occur spontaneously, meaning it could occur on its own. It doesn't mean that it's occurring fast. Rusting is spontaneous and it takes a long time to rust, right? So, but rusting will occur on its own. Oops. So we refer to our exergonic and our endergonic reactions as to whether they give off energy, catabolic reactions typically do, or they take in energy. Endergonic reactions typically take in energy. Okay, so here's an exergonic reaction, different than exothermic. If we're saying exothermic, we're specifically measuring heat. If we say exergonic, we're specifically measuring energy, right? So here's my reactants, here's my products. The difference between the two, the difference in the energy that was available in the reactants and the difference in the energy that is available within the products. This is my delta G. If delta G is less than 0, the reaction can occur spontaneously. And that makes sense when we talked about the universal liking disorder, right? If this reactant is being broken apart into smaller particles, we're going towards disorder. So cellular respiration is an example, a common example of an exergonic reaction that will give off energy. The opposite of that is photosynthesis, of course, right? Endergonic takes in energy. So the product ends with more energy than the reactants began with. So you had CO2 and water. Glucose contains more energy because it contains more bonds. So in this case, delta G is greater than 0. It's going to take an effort. It's going to take an outside source to get this reaction started. This is not spontaneous. So photosynthesis will not occur on its own. It needs energy from the sun. So what are we going to do with this energy, right? So we have a constant flow of materials in and out of the membrane. So this gets into one of those first slides. I said we need to be able to talk about why we need energy to survive. Kids a lot of times short answer an FRQ and they say they need it to survive or they need it to live. But why do they need it to live? What do they use it for? Be specific, be able to give examples, justify your reasoning. So cells are not at equilibrium. We're constantly moving things in and out of the cells. Cells perform either mechanical work, like cilia, little hairs on the outside of the cell that beat either to move food particles around for a unicellular organism, or it might move the organism through its environment. We need mechanical energy to move those chromosomes. Mitosis doesn't just occur all by itself. We need energy to move the chromosomes to the midline. We need energy to move the chromosomes away from each other. Contraction of muscle tissues. Actin and myosin slide past one another. They're not going to do that without energy. So these are all mechanical movement. Transporting things across the membrane, so especially active transport. We talked about needing energy to push things into a crowded area, to move things from a low concentration to a high concentration. And chemical, we need energy for building molecules, hormones, polymers, monomers. We need to build glycogen to store energy. A plant needs to build cellulose for its cell walls, things like that. So the energy we use is ATP. We refer to it as the energy currency of the cell. So ultimately, we need to take our nutrients, macromolecules, and convert the energy that is stored in there into energy in the form of ATP. So adenosine, adenine, the nucleotide, ribose, and phosphate. So ATP, 3 phosphate groups, triphosphate, 2 would be a diphosphate, 1 would be a monophosphate. So energy is stored within those bonds. If we are making ATP, that's an anabolic reaction, right? If we are breaking ATP, that's an exergonic reaction. Okay, So the exergonic drives the endergonic. So these are coupled reactions when one produces the energy that the other needs. So catabolic feeds anabolic. Cellular respiration feeds photosynthesis, for example. So we get energy by breaking the bond between the third and second phosphate. So the position of that phosphate has a great deal of energy. When we add a phosphate, it's called phosphorylation, and we'll be phosphorylating things in a few chapters. So we can dephosphorylate or we can phosphorylate, meaning add phosphates. Kinases are enzymes that add phosphates to other molecules, putting them either in an active or an inactive form. So this is showing you the hydrolysis. Remember hydrolysis, breaking of water or breaking with water, either way. This water molecule will break apart, allows a breaking of this bond. That releases energy. So we have ADP plus energy, plus unused energy from the position of the bond. Okay, ADP can be regenerated, so this is cyclic. We talk about cyclic AMP also. Energy from the exergonic feeds the endergonic. So the delta G just tells us whether a reaction will occur spontaneously or not. It doesn't tell you how quickly it will occur. So rusting, for example, is going to occur spontaneously, but it's going to take a really long time. Glucose, our body breaks down to release energy for all the things we need, moving our bodies, moving things in our bodies. But it can also happen with enzymes, right? So if left alone, hydrolysis of sucrose, your table sugar, or your glucose, which is your blood sugar, it'll take 1,000 years to occur. So I don't have 1,000 years. I need energy more quickly. So in that case, I still am going to use enzymes for efficiency. Okay? So that is the delta G for today. Thanks for checking in and listening to the lecture. I'll see you Wednesday.